God. Bill, I came in here today in green. You've never seen me in green. You don't even, this is ridiculous. I could just be anybody sitting here at this dang blank table. I came in green. No red. Oh my God, Jamil. You switched it up today. You're not in red. Not Bill. He's not listening.
Criticizing me because I didn't notice you were wearing green.
I mean, you've never seen me in green.
Listen, you could come in with 3 arms and 4 legs. Be lucky I noticed that. You're going to complain
So
I
if
don't
I
notice you
leave
in
here and
green.
get kidnapped, how the devil you going to give a description of what I had on?
She's got hair that the
crap.
headphones don't fit on.
They'll never find me. You need to know that.
She's got a limp in one of her legs. Don't ask me which one.
They would not find me. Oh, my goodness.
They would find you. How can they not hear you? They'd hear you from a mile away.
Exactly. But what if, I'm kidnappable? New word.
Welcome to episode 37 of Black, White, and Blue in the South, a podcast discussing democratic politics with a Southern flair. I'm Bill Kimler.
I'm Jamil Brooks.
And we're coming to you from Greenwood, South Carolina, a little red county in a very red state. If you like what you hear, please leave a rating and a review. Tell your friends about us. Follow us on social media. Or better yet, prepare a plate of fava beans and pour a nice Chianti, because if you're dining at Mar-a-Lago with Donald J. Trump, you might have a very interesting main course on your dinner. Jamil, do you recognize those words? Do you recognize that phrase?
No, not at all.
All right, you will in a second. You see, last week, Donald Trump was in Wildwood, New Jersey, which is just down the road from Atlantic City, where he bankrupted a few casinos, by the way, back in the day.
Wow.
He held a rally where he said the following.
Silence of the Lambs. Has anyone ever seen a Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man. He oftentimes would have a friend for dinner. Remember the last scene? Excuse me, I'm about to have a friend for dinner as this poor doctor walked by. I'm about to have a friend for dinner, but Hannibal Lecter. Congratulations, the late, great Hannibal Lecter.
And now a word from the late, great Hannibal Lecter.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Oh, my God.
So you're telling me you have never seen Silence of the Lambs?
I have, and when you played that, it came back to me, especially the sound he makes at the end when he's eating the bit.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Well, he did say, have you seen this movie? The fact that he says the late, great makes me wonder if he thinks that's a documentary and not a fictional film, because he thinks it's a real person. You're right. Trump's speech went on for 90 minutes.
Of him saying nothing.
And the live stream showed that most of the crowd left around 45 minutes into it.
Shut up.
You and I, we saw Biden speak in person back in January. Remember that?
We did.
How long was his speech?
Oh, my God. It was definitely more than 45 minutes, though.
Biden's speech?
You think it was?
It was only 22 minutes.
What, did you time it?
I did. I recorded his whole speech.
Everything.
Well, no, I didn't time it. I recorded it.
22 minutes.
Would you have stayed at that dinner if he went on for 90 minutes?
Okay, that makes sense. No, I'd have been gone.
Yeah,
That's
same
right.
here. I don't think I could handle it.
I'd have gave him 30 and I was out.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Exactly. But let us know what you think by dropping us a note at blackwhiteblue.in-the-south@gmail.com. Send us your comments, questions, topic ideas. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Threads, and Mastodon. We share video clips of our episodes and news articles that'll enrich what you're about to hear today, so look at those show notes, where you can find all that and more. Hi, Jamil.
Hey, Bill.
We have a special guest today that I'm keeping secret for a few minutes.
Okay.
All right, but first, before we get to our special guest, we have a few quick news items that update topics that we've covered in past episodes.
Yeah.
For up-to-the-minute reports, stay tuned to this station. Now the news.
So I'm going to take us back all the way to episode 24.
Okay.
And we talked about the really awful practice of civil forfeiture.
Mm-hmm.
So we get it that when the police conduct a raid or stop you or pull you over and there was some illegal business going on, they may have to seize the assets, so to speak, because it could be evidence. But what we find is an abuse of that process where they hold on to that property for a long time, or worse yet, they go off and sell it and turn it into an income revenue stream for the police department. Recently, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, had a case before it. So here's the situation. 2 Alabama women had to wait more than a year for their cars to be returned. You see, one of the women loaned her car to a friend. Police seized it, and they arrested the driver for methamphetamine. Terrible, terrible crime. Throw the book at them.
Yeah.
But have you ever lent your car to somebody?
No, I don't play about Julia.
You don't. Nobody's ever driven your car. Not even your husband, not your kids.
Oh, my son. I have let my son drive.
And if your son had a momentary lapse of reason and did something stupid, was pulled over, right, he should face the consequences of his actions.
Yeah, not my car, not Julia.
But your car, while it may be impounded for a day or so, you would expect to get it back when they realized, hey, it's not his car, and they get the truth of the story. Well, here in Alabama, they had her car for over a year.
Wow.
This went to the Supreme Court because they believed it was not constitutional to hold somebody else's property for that long. And by a 6-3 vote, and I'll give you one guess as to how that vote went. The justices rejected the claims of the 2 Alabama women. Justice Kavanaugh, he gave some sort of BS reason why they upheld that ruling. So anyhow, this poor lady ended up without her car for 14 months. What would happen to you if you lost Julia, your car, for 14 months?
Everything would stop.
Like, would you be able to go to work?
No.
Would you be able to pay your bills? Would your mental health be okay?
It would not be okay.
The Supreme Court just said, we don't care.
Yeah. You also may remember that we talked about South Carolina's Supreme Court. One of the justices is getting ready to age out of the system. And they had about, I think it was 7 candidates that they were interviewing for.
It was 6.
6? 6. So that means it would have been 3 men, 3 women, 3 white men.
1 white woman.
Correct.
And
2 black women. Yes. Okay. So now the finalists are in.
Well, before we get to the finalists,
okay,
the current Supreme Court, let's talk about their makeup.
Okay, so right now it's completely for South Carolina. It's all male and it's all white with the exception of 1. So when the justice who is about to age out leaves, it will be an all white bench. Once this seat, Justice Beatty's seat, is filled, the next seat that comes open is Justice John Kitteridge, and that's about 4 years down the road. Ooh. So here is like really big for South Carolinians to make sure that we get some diversity on this bench. What we don't want to have is an all-male, all-white justice that will continue to oversee the properties that happen in South Carolina.
Back in episode 30, we talked about a committee that's formed to pick candidates to replace Supreme Court judges when the seat opens. They selected 6. But you have an update. Something has happened in the last week. Tell us what happened.
They have reduced the candidates down to now having 2 women and 1 male. We kind of had a conversation about this because we were going like, who do you think is going to be left?
We took some bets.
We did. And I think I'm going to win. But what we have left is 1 male, of course, white, 1 female, of course, white, and then 1 female black. And so now it comes down to evaluating qualifications to see who that pick will be out of those 3.
All right, I've got some additional information about these 3 candidates.
Go.
But before I give it, what was your prediction for who they would select? Would it be the white male, the white lady, or the black lady?
White lady.
Okay. And who did I say? I said I had picked...
You said black lady.
It was going to be the black lady because I thought they wanted to avoid all of this argument about diversity on the bench, and they wanted to not have an all-white Supreme Court.
I don't think
and they didn't want to have an all-male Supreme Court either. So by having a single black female, it's like, check, now shut up.
They ain't going to check that box.
You don't think? Well, I actually have changed my mind based on this information. So here's the information I'm going to give you. The 3 candidates are Blake Hewitt, who is a solid Republican.
Yeah.
Jocelyn Newman, who is a solid Democrat. She is the black candidate. And Letitia Verdon, who is a solid Republican. All right, so check their public voting records and you see who they are. You see, you look at this General Assembly. They have to vote on who is going to be in the court.
Okay.
There was a circuit judge who was nominated. Do you remember the name James Smith?
Yes.
He was a House representative for many years, ran for governor in
Yes.
South Carolina,
Yes, he
lost to Henry McMaster. So he was the only candidate up for consideration on this open nomination. I mean, this is a man who's been 20 years in the House. He's an Afghanistan war veteran. This guy is going to be a circuit judge. He was a shoo-in, and the very Republican House rejected his name and sent it back to committee, saying, no, he's too liberal for us. Based on his voting record in the House, we don't want him on the circuit court.
You're not surprised.
Well, actually we are, because this was a extraordinarily rare move. Normally that type of activity usually comes when you learn the guy murdered somebody, not because of partisan reasons.
Yeah.
So he was booted out, and now that judge seat is still open, and there is such a backlog of cases right now that these counties that he was going to serve are just going to continue to suffer because this group is hyper-partisan.
Correct.
And that just occurred in the last couple of weeks. Based upon that, I'm switching my vote that it's going to be the white, very conservative justice, because there's no way they're going to allow a Democrat onto that bench.
Which one
under
do
any
you think is the
circumstance.
white, very conservative justice?
Oh, this is Letitia Verdon. She's going to win it. She's the white lady, and she's got a solid Republican voting record.
I called it.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, so we will find out in June when this election goes down. But you heard it here first. Both Jamil and I agree on something, finally, for once. We both put our money on Letitia to win solely because first they want to say that they've got a woman back on the court.
Yeah.
And then two, they've picked a very conservative person. They will never pick somebody who has a differing point of view regardless of their qualifications.
Not happening.
Our final callback is going back to episode 23, and we talked about Erskine College. You know that school?
Yeah.
You got some personal relationships at that school.
Had.
You had. They're an ex-school in your families. But anyhow, they have what we called a charter school factory. They are just allowing public money to be put into these schools without a lot of oversight, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point where it's caught the legislators' attention, and the lawmakers are now looking at their finances. A bipartisan group of lawmakers from both chambers asked state authorities in a letter to Governor McMaster to conduct audits of the Charter Institute at Erskine, a taxpayer-funded affiliate of Erskine College that oversees more than, you know how many charter schools they oversee?
How many?
More than 24. That's a lot of schools that they see that's outside of the public school system, and they want to determine if its leaders have mishandled state funds or violated the law. Remember how I read that article about some charter school leaders going to open schools in Tennessee, using South Carolina money?
Yeah.
That didn't sit too well with this oversight. So,
and I'm trying to figure out, how can Erskine handle oversight for charter schools when didn't they lose their accreditation again? That's still out. I don't think they got that resolved.
I'm thinking you and I should open up a charter school institute because there's some
could
good
do
money
it.
to be made there.
We could do it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is my immense pleasure to welcome in a very special episode of Black, White, and Blue in the South. We're going to call this a family episode. We're going to call this an episode where we're so desperate for guests, we ask family members to hop onto the show. Introducing my eldest and only son, William Clyde Kimler V.
Yay.
Welcome, Will.
Yay.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Glad to join in. You ever hear my joke of naming my future son William Clyde Kimler V Jr.?
No, I haven't heard that yet. That would be awesome. I would totally sign up for that. So Will is my second biological child. His sister Amanda is the oldest. And then, of course, I've got two stepdaughters as well. But I want to give you a taste of what it was like to grow up in my household. This is a story I love to tell. Around Christmas time, they were, 7, 10, maybe 6, 9, around that age. And we had drilled it into them that if they get a Christmas gift from somebody, that's something they already had, not to make a deal out of it. You want to make the gift giver feel special. So you act surprised, you act very grateful, you make that person feel special. So Christmas morning arrives and we rush to the tree and we helped distribute the gifts. So we gave the kids their first round of gifts. They opened it up and in it were video games. I think we had like a GameCube at the time, and it was games they already had because we took them from downstairs and wrapped them and gave it back to them. So They opened up and they were like, yay, this is awesome. And Will's like, I've always wanted this game, whatever it was. They did a great job. Second round of gifts come out. And this time it's DVDs that we grabbed from downstairs and wrapped them up. They were still trying to put on the face and the smiling face. And then the third round were books that we took out of their bedrooms.
Oh,
and in
my
fact,
goodness.
Amanda's book still had the bookmark in it where she left off. She said, what's going on here? So yeah, we tortured them
Yeah, that's
nonstop.
That's
Every
torture.
Christmas was a gag, but they gave as well as they got. Will, give me an example of a prank you pulled on me that you're particularly proud of.
The Monkey Jesus one, that one was really awesome.
Yes. What he's referring to is that there was a famous fresco of Jesus from like the 14th century or whatever that some lady got. Now, this is, hundreds of years old. She tried to touch it up, but in touching it up, she got all of the oil and paint smeared. So it created a very blurry looking Jesus, that one that used to be very fine detailed.
Oh, wow.
Now it's blurred and it looks like a monkey. I mean, when you look at it from a distance. And so for Christmas, they got me a full-blown replica of it and framed and it hangs in my office to this day.
Oh, that's cool.
So, Will, tell us a little bit about yourself. How old are you? Where are you from? What do you do?
I am 25, just turned.
Happy birthday, by the way. His birthday was
thanks.
just a couple of days ago.
Oh, happy birthday.
I work in cybersecurity and, live in New York.
Oh, that bastion of liberal evil.
Well, it's upstate New York, so not as
Oh,
much.
that's Confederate flag country
Yeah,
right
it's
up
a little
there. That's for
different.
sure.
Yeah, it's really funny that my girlfriend, who's from Alabama, was surprised at the amount of Confederate flags in upstate New York, and I was like,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know, this wasn't Confederate territory. They didn't get the message.
Well, you got a sense of who my son is. He's a good guy, smart guy. Couldn't be more proud of him. He gets to keep the name. He has to renew it with me every year in order to keep it. But he's done well.
Oh, I'm taking my girlfriend's last name, by the way.
Yeah, that makes
So-
sense, you liberal New Yorker. That's the kind of thing you would do up there. Do you consider yourself to be a political person? Because I'll tell you, when I was your age, I was not. I mean, I voted, but I think I just knew who the president was, and that was about it. How would you assess yourself?
I would assess myself as it's always been in the news, even when I was like in high school and couldn't vote. Thank God I couldn't vote in the Trump versus Hillary. I mean, looking back at it, they're both terrible options. So I'm glad that I didn't have to vote during that. But then, yeah, Biden-Trump was, my first ever like presidential election. I haven't really been like super political, but also you see something and it's effed up. And that's kind of just been my view for a lot of things when it comes to politics, especially recently. And I mean, it made sense when Trump was in office. At least you could see where the chaos was coming from. Now it's just things are still that way and it's rough. I don't know.
In my opinion, they're still coming from the same place.
Yeah, I don't think they ever put that genie back in the bottle.
You know why I invited you to our show. And namely, it was because I wanted you to talk about when you attended a Trump rally back in the 2020, 2019. So let's start with that. That's
Let's
something
start with
I've
that.
never personally experienced. Jamil, have you ever been to a Trump rally?
No.
No. So where was it? When was it? And talk about how you ended up there.
Okay, so it was.
And do you need to put your
I-
MAGA hat on to tell the story, by the way? You can
No,
go.
he
You can go put
shouldn't.
that on.
He shouldn't.
It was about like 45 minutes away from where I lived. So me and two of my friends, we were like, why not look at this? This was during during my high school, during, when he was first running for the first time. And I wanted to see the crowd. We didn't actually end up in the rally itself. So we just like went to the town, saw the line of people, and it was kind of concerning just because we were some of the only young people there. So we did draw a lot of attention from people in line. And one of the things that people in line kept saying to me was like, "Hey, you going off to college?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm leaving, this year." They kept saying, like, multiple different people was like, "Well, don't believe anything they tell you. They just try to brainwash you and everything." I was like, "Oh."
So with that warning and having gone through 4 years, do you feel like you were brainwashed?
No, they didn't teach me much of anything.
You could have gone for a little brainwashing for the money we spent
Yeah,
to send
they-
you
they
there.
really-
So here I am. I'm interviewing somebody who went to but didn't actually get into a Trump rally. Boy, you turned out to be a great guest. I picked a winner here.
Oh, I guess I'll just head out then. It was Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and that's a wrap.
Glad to share my input.
That is not a wrap. You said the most valuable thing ever. They kept saying, don't listen to anything that they tell you. Are you going to college?
So this was during the first Trump election. This was the Trump versus Hillary election, because that was the same year you ended up going to college. And already you encountered a very anti-education crowd. And they felt that higher education was just there to brainwash children with liberal agendas. So coming out of college, did you turn liberal? Did you get influenced, in your cybersecurity class?
I mean, I did also take a bunch of Homeland Security classes.
That's true. Talk about the program you signed up for, because it was the first time that they offered it, and probably, I think, the first in the nation, too, wasn't it?
It's not the first cybersecurity program, but it was one of the first. The major name was College of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, and Emergency Preparedness. And then they added on informatics at the end.
Oh.
And it became the longest name ever, because then once you say all those words, you have to then add with a concentration in cybersecurity.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
So by the time you're done with it, there's no room on the diploma for your name.
The running joke was if you could, say the major name all the way through, you probably learned enough to graduate. But it was a very new course. We did have some amazing people from the field, like actual people who teaching was only like their part-time job. But like this was also their first time ever like making a class, so there wasn't like a strict curriculum yet, which probably didn't help for being a part of it in the first run. That being said, though, I still did learn a lot in college, but mostly through a student-run organization, the Cyber Defense Organization. That was where I got a lot of the actual learning that I did in college.
You would actually play war games, right? You would go into competition and do cyber battle against other teams, and that's where you learned everything.
Up until late in the night, we'd be in the computer labs, either trying to defend or some of them were trying to hack other people on teams.
That's cool.
They were a lot of fun.
Well, let's talk about why I really brought you on. You and I were talking about 2 weeks ago, and you asked me a question that I didn't expect, and it was what my opinion was regarding this item in the news that's just not going away. It's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's the protests that have popped up on college campuses all over the globe. Jamil and I have touched upon it from time to time. In fact, we were at a speech that President Biden gave here in Columbia, South Carolina, which was interrupted 3 different times by protesters.
That's why I thought his speech was 45 minutes.
Right. Yeah, half of it was interruptions.
Yeah.
But that happened everywhere Biden went, by the way. It wasn't just here in South Carolina. Now, before we go into details, I want to issue a disclaimer. I will be making statements today that may not necessarily be reflective of what I believe. Instead, I wanted to take the opportunity to probe this issue, try to see things from different sides, try to poke holes in arguments if holes can be poked and defenses can be shored up. So I'm just going to try to attack it from many different angles, so please don't take anything I say out of context or as what I firmly believe. And what I'm not interested in are hearing simplified lines and chants like Israel has a right to defend itself or from the river to the sea. I'm not interested in stuff that fits on a sign or can be shouted in a megaphone. I'm interested in conversation. I want to hear what's going on, what the beliefs are, challenge the beliefs or defend those beliefs and see where we go. Because I believe, to be quite honest with you, that there is just a lot of wrong on both sides. And all I aim to do here is listen and probe the claims and beliefs of all. So let's talk about what's happening at the college level.
Okay.
And I'll start with you, Will. You were telling me a story of how you've actually got involved at a local university yourself. So tell me kind of how it started to form in your area and what inspired you to jump in.
Mostly, I didn't even start off with college campuses or anything. I went to a march in New York City. That was kind of
when was that?
The main thing that I did. That was probably 2 weeks ago now.
Okay, and there was a march. Who organized that march, or how did you hear about it?
Basically, I just kept hearing about Palestine protests, and I wanted to know when one was going to be because I didn't want to be on the wrong side of history. So I looked up for when one was going to happen.
So let's be clear. What side did you protest for? Because you haven't even said that yet. We don't know who you protested with.
That is true. I could have showed up, as a counter-protester. But no, I showed up to march with the anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian people.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is a topic you have been following all along, or you just got educated on it when you decided to go protest in it?
I decided to go protest on it when I saw two things. When the U.S. chose to fund Israel once again, and I know that there was humanitarian aid within that budget as well, but still, when I saw that they chose to continue sending weapons and financial aid to Israel, and when I saw that the college campus protests were getting, in my opinion, smeared by politicians of both sides, but being called anti-Semitic. And that was what convinced me that I needed to actually stand up and get out of my house and not just complain about it. I wanted to go to myself and make sure that it was not anti-Semitism, that it really was just chanting, please stop killing people, you know?
That was going to be my question, Will. What was your why for going? But I think you did a good job in saying you were going to find out information because, Bill and I talked about this on a previous podcast on how there's so much information out there. You really don't know which part of it is true and which part isn't. So how do you get the information that's needed to make a stance from you being a college grad? Where are you getting your information from? What are you relying on?
Well, again, it's kind of funny that you already brought up the Trump rally because that was another thing that I was willing to go to a Trump rally, not supporting him because I wanted to see it for myself. Mm-hmm. And at the time, people kept saying all these things, Trump's just being attacked by the media. And I was like, okay, well, I want to go and make my own opinion, make sure that, I'm seeing this.
You see how he's so skeptical. It all goes back to those Christmas gifts we gave him. We pranked him nonstop, so now he doesn't believe a darn thing anybody says, and he has to go see for himself.
But I like that because what you've done is you debunked their theory. Don't go to college because you're going to be brainwashed, but that's not what happened to you. You're still a person, and I like to say like a researcher, you're still digging for the answers as to why something is occurring, and you're not necessarily taking it from somewhere else. You're going yourself. I think that's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
How big was the rally in your estimation? Was it like tens of thousands of people through the streets, a couple of hundred? What would you say?
I would say maybe a couple thousand, not tens of thousands, though. It was pretty long. I do want to circle back, though, just because I didn't fully answer the question. I do think that politicians at the moment think that TikTok specifically is radicalizing the kids, and that's why they voted to ban it. So I do use TikTok, but that is not my main source of news. I have seen some disturbing things on it, though. But I also, anytime I see something disturbing, much like whenever I saw Trump tweet something, I always actually went to Twitter to make sure Trump actually said that. And every single time he did, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, no, this is fake. Nope. But anyways, and that's the same. It's like anytime I see something on TikTok, I go and look to see if it actually happened.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a point. At the very beginning of this, October 7th, 2023, Hamas launched an absolutely brutal attack on unsuspecting Israelis, as I had testified in a podcast that very week. I work with a lot of people from Israel on a daily basis, and even an ex-employee of the company I work for, his family and himself were taken hostage. Family members were killed at a birthday party, and to this day, he's still not been located. I think Israel had the whole goodwill of the world at that point because, yes, there had been attacks going back and forth, going back decades, and there's wrong happening both sides, but something like this came out of nowhere, and Israel had every right to respond. But now here we are, 9 months later, and it seems to have gotten so very one-sided. So when you hear numbers, well, what's the number in your mind of how many Palestinians are dead at this point?
There are a bunch of numbers going around, and that is difficult part of this is no one really can say exactly. If you get numbers that are looking from 40,000 to 45,000, Israel's going to come back and say those are Hamas numbers. We don't agree with that. At the same time, there are tens of thousands that have died in the past, several months. And then millions more that have been displaced.
Yeah, so even to this day, Hamas is still firing missiles into Israel. Yep. So the United States is pressuring Israel not to, continue with their planned invasions, and yet, as soon as they think they got Israel on board, then Hamas fires rockets into Israel from that territory. And what's Israel supposed to do? Just ignore that? Hamas are embedded within the population, and they're still firing into civilian territories in Israel. What is Israel supposed to do?
I can't tell Israel how to do this. I mean, I'd like to say only go after a terrorist, don't go after the human shields. Of course, it's a horrible situation over there. What I'm saying is the struggle, though, is the fact that we're involved at all. That's what makes this so much worse, especially for me and for a lot of people, because we don't want to be involved in the conflicts that are over there. And now I'm not saying that like we just want to let them go at it, that's not what I mean either. But the fact that we have, as a country, embedded ourselves into this conflict, we have been funding it. We have been the sole people that have been refusing to allow Palestine to become a member of the United Nations. Like, we vetoed that. We were one of 9 UN members that voted against even giving them, rights and privileges last Friday. It's sending money over there, which, a lot of people my age feel like that the economy is already in a mess right now. Why is our tax dollars going to help one side, Israel, kill 14,000 children? That is a number that I do believe. And I know it's not an exact number, but there's just so many people dying. It's really rough to talk about because it hurts that much more when, one, it's our money that's being sent over there. And then 2, when people protest that, then they get called by our government anti-Semitic, get the cops called on them, and then they get arrested. It's a really rough situation.
Yeah.
You know what, though? And I'm glad you led into that because that was going to be my next question for you. And I know you don't speak for your whole age group.
No. He was voted as their leader and
Is he their
spokesperson. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, from the age of 20 to 27, Will is their elected leader. Go ahead.
So I know that is not what you're doing, but my question was, what do you say when someone says we should just mind our business? Do you think that it is inhumane to say that we've done too much and we have fueled the fire even more? You view it as we might be. We might be in over our head. Maybe we should not be in this deep is a valid conversation. But then that opens up the door to ask how we get out of this. Are we too far into this situation now to pull back and let the two entities handle it themselves? What do we do? And my question that I know you can't answer is, what was at the negotiating table for either side when it came down to us, when we showed up? What did we say we would do? And are we able to maintain that with all things that are happening?
The sad thing is that there truly are idiots on both sides of this equation. You've got Senator Lindsey Graham here in South Carolina who looks at the protesters and calls them dumbasses or terrorist sympathizers. That's what he said in a national talk show, that they're only one of 2 types, dumbasses or terrorist sympathizers. Will, which one do you put yourself into that category, since there's only 2 that he says that there are?
I mean, I'm a dumbass just like anyone else. But
Fair enough. Fair enough. The other problem is that there are true anti-Semitic people, anti-Semites within the protesters, and I've seen the signs. They're waving Hamas flags. Yep. They're waving the flag of the terrorists. They're chanting death to Israel. And while they may be a very small portion of it, I read an article that the media is only going to focus on the extreme comments from both sides and the extreme statements. And they don't look at the majority of the protesters who are just truly peaceful and doing whatever it is the First Amendment allows them to do. Do you support closing of bridges and blocking traffic in support of these protests?
Yes. 100%, because people always bring up lawful versus unlawful protests, and I hate that. I think it needs to be peaceful versus not peaceful protests. Unlawful protests are respected throughout history. The sit-ins with Martin Luther King Jr., those were unlawful protests, and they were some of the most important ones. I really do think that protests are supposed to be disruptive. Protests are supposed to take up space. Otherwise, there are unjust laws out there. There are so many. In 3 states, it banned mass protests just in general, which is very much against the cores of, American values that I was taught growing up as a kid, that you have a right to free speech, you have a right to protest if you feel like something's wrong. And now 3 states are just taking that away, and that's okay. I'm very much for closing streets. It is a little hypocritical at the same time when you see right-wing media, which, like Fox is all for the Canadian trucker protests closing down roads and cities and everything. But then when the left does it, then now it's a horrible thing.
And you think that by causing a mass, we'll call it an inconvenience, that you at least bring attention to the message. But I'll tell you where my concern is. When shutting down a bridge or a major thoroughfare to make that message, there could be an ambulance with your mother inside of it, that's trying to get to the hospital and now can't. And is that a sacrifice that we're willing to force upon innocent Americans in order to get that message heard, or do we think we can be effective in getting that message out without interrupting flow of traffic or other public services? We've been seeing in colleges all over the world, and it started in Columbia University?
I believe it was the first.
Yeah, I believe it was. And then it actually spread like wildfire. What do you think that their biggest goal is by protesting on campus? What are the demands as far as you understand them?
Divestment from Israel, that's one of the main ones. I know a lot of them say that they don't actually get a clear picture of where their money is going when you pay tuition and room and board for college. First off is disclose so that all students at least know where the money is going that they are spending, then divest from Israel and then other companies that are part of aiding this.
Well, hey, this has been a great conversation. I won't keep you too much longer. What you're going through is actually very similar to something that I went through when I was in college in the early 90s. Back then, the global initiative was apartheid in South Africa, and there were college protests. I went to one, and you know what the demands were? Divest. I'm going to ask a related but seemingly unrelated question. Do you have a 401k?
I do, yes.
And what companies are they invested in?
Truly no idea. I have no idea what a 401k really does.
Right. Well, what they do is they take your money, they blend it up, and then they just sprinkle it across a million different investments. They've got money managers and market funds and, real estate, and it's just they try to make the most money out of it. But who knows really where that money is? And as I understand it from the universities, the tuition that you pay goes all to operations. So, I mean, your cafeterias, the electricity, the teachers, and so on. But the investments are done through endowments. And that's where the colleges will invest the endowment and then live off the interest and use that interest for other investments like new buildings or, facilities or what have you. And kind of like a 401k, as I'm reading this one article, a university could have, over 2,000 different investments being done, 5 levels down, with different market managers and firms and funds. All they're looking to do is get a profit, but the universities aren't picking and choosing who they're investing in. They're going to a market fund and say, give us a return on our investment. In fact, there are some universities that are in states that forbid them, that by law, they're not allowed to, because it's a public university, so it's state run. They're not allowed to change their investment strategy without legislator approvals, which is really weird. And I'm wondering, aside from getting the media exposure, if the campus protests are having an effect. I think they might be. What do you think, Jamil?
I don't know. You and I have had this conversation, and I have mixed emotions about it. I think it's effective in one thing. It is bringing attention to it, to the support of universities and their support when you don't know. A young individual is just going to the college of their choice to receive the degree and to disclose where all the funds are going. I support that. I don't think that needs to be a secret if you're paying tuition. But I can tell you from being on the college end that a lot of the tuition fees are for operational expenses. And you're right on it with the endowments going for the other investments. And I think you did a great job with the 401 being a great analogy in this particular situation. What I will tell you that I love most about what is happening, even though this is a horrific scene, is the passion of the people that are showing up every day and protesting and putting their own self aside. So this is a huge act of selflessness. And I'm grateful for that, to know that there are compassionate people out there. Do I feel like long term this is going to, the protest on the college campuses will decrease the endowments? I don't. And I don't feel like it will have the strong impact that students would like, because the endowments are coming from individuals who said, here is my money, you take it and you do whatever the limitations say.
I think there is some impact. I mean, just in this past week, there has been a change in the Biden administration's policy, and they're now withholding an arms shipment of massive bombs to Israel.
But that's not from the universities. I'm talking about from the universities.
Well, I'm still thinking that, when you've got 400 college campuses embroiled in protests and it's starting to spread globally as well, you don't think that Joe Biden and team see that? I think they see that. Will, you had a complaint that, being a protester and just being labeled anti-Semitic as a result, as you were marching in New York City, did you chant any anti-Jewish protest slogans?
Nope.
No, you know he wouldn't.
I was not, and
I just wanted to, and I'm going somewhere with this.
I know.
yeah. The only thing that I know the government has been trying to say is anti-Semitic is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They claim that is an anti-Semitic phrase, which I don't believe that's phrases.
Well, here's the thing about phrases. The phrase is in the ear of the beholder. So I think like racial epithets or the Confederate flag, you're going to hear the same people go, there's nothing wrong with that Confederate flag. Well, you know what? I'm going to take the opinion of those who live around it, heard it, see it, and what that means in terms of slavery, and listen to them. If from the river to the sea has been used for decades to mean a certain thing, and now somebody's going to say it doesn't mean that, I'm not going to buy into that. But it's funny that you talk about the right wing claiming that these protests are anti-Semitic. 2 quick points.
No, not just the right wing. Both
sides.
Biden administration, the press secretary, is that what it's called?
Sure.
The person who does briefings with the press. Ever since Colombia came out and started a protest, ever since then, all she would say basically is, we don't support anti-Semitic speech. And that was just the flat statement. We're saying almost nothing about the protest, just trying to keep turning the conversation into college campus protests and then only responding with, we don't support anti-Semitism. Even then, I can't stand that. Like, that just seems so manipulative, trying to only say we don't support anti-Semitism when referencing protests that's supposed to be anti-genocide. I just can't get behind that.
Well, it's interesting because I've heard her speak, because I do listen to press briefings, and I've also heard Joe Biden give a whole speech on this subject, and he is very clear. He is in favor of protests. He says it is a tradition that goes back many generations. He said it clearly.
Yeah, and then he added lawful protests, which is where I also draw a line, because I did hear that speech as well, and he made a clear point into lawful protests. There does have to be a boundary, 100%. Threatening someone and their safety, that is not peaceful. I do want to draw a line. Just because you don't physically punch someone in the face, that isn't the line. There is definitely a line way before that where something can be not peaceful. I mean, even destruction of property, like what happened at Hins Hall. I didn't have a problem with going into Hins Hall, but destroying the whole place, that was maybe also a little over the line. But we did bring up how the media is going to focus on the few individuals that are the extremists on either side, and that is entirely true. I mean, even in the protest that I went to that had easily thousands of people in it, there were like 5 people there who were waving communist flags and were a part of the Communist Party. And it was kind of funny because we were like walking near them and we looked over like, oh, those are just communists. Oh, so they're just not doing what we're doing here. Like, no, I don't think that Palestine wants to do communism.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's always going to be outliers with any large group of people trying to send a message. It is going to happen. I don't think that has to reflect or should take away the attention from what the original message was supposed to be.
Well, Will, I appreciate your time. I know you've got a social activity to go attend to and get your mind off of more serious things. Any last words you want to say before we go?
I will say just keep your eyes on Rafah. It is, at the moment, the most densely populated city, people per square foot in the world, just because of the 5 million people that are there. And as Israeli forces keep moving closer towards it, keep bombing closer towards it, and I know the Biden administration has started to pull back support, but truthfully, keep eyes on it.
I truly believe that he is in the worst position ever, because no matter what side he goes to, it's going to be the wrong side to millions of people who consider themselves Biden supporters at one time. So if you go full-fledged, cut off all support to Israel, that'll win over a good portion of the population and then immediately anger everybody else at the same time. And then if he does full support for Israel, we see it, generated protests throughout the nation. I'm just thinking there is no policy he could make that's going to win.
That's why I asked, do we think that we are too far in? Like, what do we expect to happen at this point?
I fully expect that Trump will become elected as the next president of the United States because of this fractured support around Biden. And while maybe Biden is the strongest climate president that's ever been and done more for on all these other check boxes, there was no box he could check on this Israeli-Palestinian stuff either way that wouldn't have caused a large portion to break away and say, listen, I'm going to vote for RFK Jr. or I'm not going to vote at all, just sit at home. And then next thing you know, Trump is back and he's appointed 2 more Supreme Court judges. And now every right's just been taken away and we're in a fascist country. I mean, that's the big fear we have. So I don't know how we work ourselves out of this. Well, William, on that depressing note, thank you so much for taking time with us. I wish you a great evening.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I'd be glad to come back on if you ever...
You lie. You regret doing this.
No, it was definitely fun to talk to you about this. And by fun is maybe not the right word.
Yeah, we'll have to pick a more cheery topic.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Black, White, and Blue in the South. We hope you enjoy what you heard. Please take a quick minute and leave us a rating and a review of our show. If you do, I promise not to have any more of my kids on as guests on the show. If you are a blue dot in a red sea, keep the faith, keep up the hard work. Change only happens over many years of work and dedication. As the late, great Hannibal Lecter once said, quid pro quo. I tell you things, you tell me things. Not about this case, though, about yourself. Quid pro quo, yes or no. So let's go out there and quid some pro and quo, y'all.
Oh, gosh.
I don't even know what that means.
But you chose that one.
Quotes are tough to find nowadays.
No.
We're running short on quotes.
Oh, gosh. The end.
The preceding podcast is a product of Big Media and copyright 2024, all rights reserved.